In this video, I really want to talk about something that I look for a lot kind of in the middle to late part of the summer, which we are coming up on. So I kind of wanted to make a video prior to this happening because what is about to happen really tends to change how the fish position in a lot of these lakes. And so the more that you know this kind of leading up to it, the better you will be off. It's something that you can always start looking out for. Now, before we get into it, this video is brought to you by Fin Fishing Apparel. And as you guys know, right now for just another few days, all of the USA made sun shirts, like the new one that I'm wearing right here, so one of my favorite new colors, they're all 15% off. Also, I just got in brand new like fitted neck gaiters that are pretty sweet, and the sun gloves are back in stock. So I'm gonna leave links for those all down below in the description. I greatly appreciate all of you for shopping at Fin Fishing. Now what's this thing? Like I said, anytime that I get into kind of that middle to late summer, what you see happen in a lot of the lakes is the water will get really hot and you have a thermocline that starts to develop. Now, when that thermocline really starts to develop, as a lot of you guys know, it's very important to pay attention to where the thermocline is on a lot of our lakes. Now, you can typically see the thermocline on either down imaging or on your 2D. Usually it's gonna kind of come up. It's like I said, it's very noticeable. It's usually a pretty hazy bar that you will see that comes up. And the thing about that thermocline is that area right at the thermocline is typically where you will see a lot of fish position. But anytime I really start to see a good thermocline develop, I know that there's going to be a shallow water bite that occurs. Now, no matter what time of the year it is, there's always a shallow population of fish, a shallow resident population of fish, fish that stay shallow all year long. A lot of these lakes have plenty of cover. They have plenty of food options for bass to stay shallow, and they're gonna stay shallow. But if you fish on lakes where like an offshore pattern tends to like predominantly win a lot of tournaments, for example, this is a time of year like late July, August, into September, where you will start to see a lot more fish up in the shallows than you have in May, in June, in all of July so far. And the thing is that, again, the thermocline has developed, so those fish that were deep are now starting to move up shallow. The other thing that also forces a lot of these fish up shallow is usually like July, August, like those are kind of like the prime months for a lot of like vegetation growth. So if your lake has milfoil or lily pads or reeds or whatever kind of vegetation it may have, like it's typically the thickest and the best during this time of year. So that shallow water is going to be putting off a lot of oxygen if there's a lot of vegetation. So again, there's a lot of different factors that are all pushing a lot of the fish population into shallow water. Now, when I say shallow water, I'm not always referring to the same shallow water that you may have caught them in during the spring. You know, when fish are moving up to actually spawn, you may catch them in a little bit different areas than you will in the middle of summer. Now, one of the things that I really like to look for is actually what I call like shallow offshore structure. So a lot of the lakes, when you look at a map, you may see a map, or you may look at a piece of structure that's, you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 foot deep that falls into 30, 35, 40 foot depths. Like those are a lot of the summertime type things that I'm looking for. But in this time of the year, I might look for a lot of that structure that is just really shallow. Maybe it's 6 foot on top, 5 foot on top, 3 foot on top. These are the areas that I want to find. Now, if there is grass in your lakes, you're more than likely going to be able to see a lot of grass that's topped out in these areas. But even if there's not grass, this is still a very, very good pattern to find. I remember a number of years ago, I was fishing down on Kentucky Lake, and Kentucky Lake has gone through periods in its cycles where it's had a lot of grass on the lake and no grass on the lake. And this was a period where there was really no grass at all, no vegetation. And I was fishing it in August of the year, and I was doing typical, this was actually also before the carp. So like back in the day, almost everyone caught a ton of fish offshore structure fishing on Kentucky Lake, looking for, you know, mussel beds and fishing ledges and things like that. But the thing is that I did that for like a whole day, was really struggling to locate a group of fish. And even the few groups that I came across, they weren't like, I was having a struggle to actually be able to get them to bite anything. So what I ended up doing is working up onto this really shallow flat. It was kind of a flat that had an indent in it. And it was in like 3 foot of water. Very, very shallow water, but it dropped off into the main river channel. So there was a little bit of current right in that area. And the thing about it is there was also a few big stumps in the area. And I simply started firing around a top water bait and catching a ton of fish. Like, it was the difference between struggling all day to get around fish and starting to catch a lot of fish. And this is, again, hottest part of the year. Those fish had moved up into shallow water, and that is where they were. And so there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of things, including pressure, that just tends to push a lot of fish up shallow during kind of the mid to late summer. It's something that I always look for. And one thing I want to leave you guys with before I let you go is that another big pattern you're going to find is fish that are in creeks. You know, we've seen this, I talked about it a number of times with guys like John Cox, who will run up into these teeny tiny creeks and get completely away from the main lake, and they will be able to get around a lot of fish. And so this is, again, another pattern that if your lake has this kind of setup, it can be a really, really big deal. Again, a number of years ago, I was actually up in Michigan, which in Michigan, you have a ton of vegetation. You tend to have fish that are shallow year round. But I remember fishing on this lake, and I actually drove over this really tiny creek on the way over to it. But I remember looking down at this creek, seeing a lot of lily pads, seeing a little bit of current flow. And then we went out and fished the main lake for a while, caught some fish, but it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I remembered that creek. I ran right up into that creek. We got a ways up into that creek around these couple of bends, and literally it was night and day. We started catching a ton of fish, literally just like old school frogging. And that's the best thing that I find with these shallow water fish that you will see in kind of the late summer period, is that typically you can catch these fish often on top waters or power fishing techniques, flipping and pitching, a lot of top water fishing, chatterbait fishing, those type of techniques, spinner baits even. So be on the lookout, look at your lakes, try to look for that shallow structure that is offshore or these creeks that might feed into the lake. This is something that is going to happen kind of getting into August, definitely in September, that you want to kind of be ready for when it happens, because it can lead to a lot of good fishing. Now, I'm not saying that the deep water fishing is not still happening. It absolutely is. You just might have to get a little bit more finessey in order to catch those fish, or really wait for the conditions to line up right. Maybe the current, maybe the wind, maybe the weather. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to check out that fin fishing gear, including the new neck gaiters or the sun gloves, and I will see you guys tomorrow.